Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my show. Michael Massie, Stories in Stone and Silver, or Silver and Stone. I'm originally from Labrador, Happy Valley Goose Bay. This is the first show with Pat Feheley and Feheley Fine Arts. I've been working with Pat now for 4 years, and it's been a great change. I've worked with other galleries before, but it's nice to be closer to home to have my exhibitions. Also, it's in a good center of North America, is in Toronto, which is a huge art center. But right now we're going to have my show opening up this evening within a very short period of time, and the works are made of stone and a lot of exotic materials, exotic woods, things like that, bone, and then you get into the teapots, which are usually sterling silver and exotic woods. So, hope you enjoy the show. This one here is Oddity. The idea behind this one was looking at artists as we sometimes are seen in society, as we are kind of odd. It could be just the way we dress, could be the way we talk, or especially the fact that it's just art we make. But it's kind of a tribute to this. This one almost never made it to being a piece, actually, but it was thanks to one of the young girls here in the gallery, Emily, who actually convinced me to make it. So this one is sterling silver, the main body, and then you have a sapple wood for this leg. This owl leg is moose antler and sterling silver, and the other leg on this side is, I believe it's oak and ebony. The arm is Indian rosewood. The harpoon is moose antler and sterling silver and artificial sinew, and the eye is sapple and moose antler, lignin vitae, the green, ebony, and sterling silver. But I really wanted to just have something that was just really odd in a lot of ways. It's, I like abstract. And over the years, I've worked with pieces that had legs similar to this. I made numerous owls, so the owl feet had to come in. I've had an odd walrus or so where I've added, it might have been out of stone, and I've added a wooden leg. And then that arm is similar to some sets I did before, and the eye is the same thing. But it's just kind of a collaboration of a number of pieces that I've done before, but changing the actual design that was used before, because I do not make the same thing twice. So the idea of having it on 3 legs as a balancer was the idea here as well. And then you have the beak. So it again falls under oddity. It is an odd little creature, but I love them. The fingernails are moose antler as well on that one. So I do try to get into as much inlay as possible. So like the fingernails I add just because it sets off the hand better. If I left it without the inlay, it wouldn't be as exciting, I don't think is a good word probably to use. They can be functional. This one is semi-functional. There is a way to tell if a teapot is actually functional. But anyway, this one here is semi-functional. It will drip a little, but not too much. That's the whole idea. But it does pour well. I know that from as I was making. But yeah, so that's pretty much this one. Everything was meant to be not perfect as well, like in the sense of like that harpoon is not a perfect straight line, and the tip of the harpoon is not perfectly straight. That's the whole idea. But it also helps draw you down into front to side or side to side sort of thing. This one is The Big Leap. It's a story about a father and son who are out fishing, and the father they were walking along shore, and next thing you know, his father was in the water waist deep or knee deep sort of thing, and a big eye comes out, and he's got his cuckovic up in the air, and he slams it into the water, and he pulls it out, and the son says he sees the biggest fish he's ever seen, sort of thing. So this is just like that moment of like getting ready to kind of do that. And this one here, I ended up doing a human hand for the hand that holds the QUILLIQ. And it was just showing the human side, and I like transformation because it's something I've always went in my head to when I was quite young. But the other arm is a fin of a fish, and the texture on his parka is actually scales. So I was trying to get as much fishy information there as possible besides the QUILLIQ or the trident. But again, now this one where I was being more serious with the story, I kept things like the harp or the QUILLIQ itself is on a nice straight line with the staff, and then I tried to get as close to as possible with the actual tip of a QUILLIQ, and I added a touch of brass in there just to kind of set it off, sort of thing. But the inlay again is something that I've always worked with, and I try and get that in most of my pieces. It's the idea, but it's a fun piece. I just wanted us playing around with this one. Here we have an insect that I really enjoy. It wasn't something I grew up to love starting in life, but it's a dragonfly. I used to be petrified of them when I was really young, until my father told me that they actually eat mosquitoes and black flies. So then all of a sudden it was like, okay, they're cool. So previously, before these, I've made a few other dragonflies, but they're always individual. With this one, I wanted to get that intimacy of creating life again. So it's called Making Love in the Tall Grass. And a few things are like taking from home, the tall grasses we always had when we were young, loads of dragonflies. I've seen them mate before, and it's quite interesting, but I like that how delicate it can be. And like the wings, you know, the idea of their wings and how they have 4 instead of just 2, which is pretty cool for an insect and stuff. But I wanted to try and have it have balance. So just like it would if it was in nature, because they're so light, they don't bend the grass much. So I try to have that same feel with this one. So what we have with this one is it's brass. The wings, the eyes, the legs are all brass. The bodies of the dragonflies are serpentine. The grass blade and the stem of the grass, that's copper that has been patinaed with kitty litter and ammonia, which is pretty cool. It'll turn copper that color, and then the base of the wood is sapple, I believe, and that's the color. I chose the color of the base to represent more of the earthy color of brown. But this is also like I love dragonflies, and they're difficult to do mostly because of the wings, but they are so much fun to do because each one gets a little better in my standards. So these ones right now, I've really enjoyed how the legs turned out and the new way that I've attached the wings and stuff to the stone. So it's been a challenge, but it worked out as a good challenge. This one below here, that's called Time for a Change. And I've read numerous Inuit legends and stories about the culture and how people respect nature and try and respect each other. When a community kills a whale or numerous seals or caribou, normally that's distributed to everybody in the community. And it's normally elders that get taken care of first. In this story, it's about a man who always, every time he never went hunting. He always waited for the hunters to come back. Now, he was capable of hunting, and it used to make the hunters quite mad, but they never ever said anything to him. But every time they came back, he would always show up to pick up his share of meat. And after he did that numerous times, they decided to have a meeting in the community and gather a shaman with them and try and get the shaman, to help convince him somehow to change his not so great ways and help the family more, or community more. So he never changed. So the shaman decided to turn him into a larvae in hopes that when he grew back into something, that it would be something more beautiful, and maybe he would help the people. So that's how in the larvae stage. And this one is anhydrite for the body, caribou antler for his little funny tail, and the legs and the little dots on top and on his head, that's moose antler. The little hairs that you see sticking off, that's moose hair. The eyes, again, are like an Indian rosewood, a bone, and an ebony, and the teeth are also moose antler. But I like the idea of, bugs tend to be gross little creatures for most people, so I tried to get him to have that look of, not that attractive, and he's, and gave him a greenish color face to give that larvae look. So that's what that piece is about, is how he's been changed into a larvae and hoping for things to change. And time for a change is how the story came about. So here we have intensity, and the name derived from the fact that it was quite intense to work with. And this was not even considered a design, because this one came about from when I was working on Oddity, and while I was actually to the drawing stage, where I was trying to figure out exactly what to do, what materials I was going to use. I had a few people look at the drawing and actually say it was kind of weird, sort of thing. Like, it just didn't seem like me. And I don't know why they said that, because I mean, they've seen so many of my carvings and things and teapots previous. But because of those comments, I decided to opt out of Oddity at the time. And I started playing around with structure. Structural forms that hold up buildings, or it's about balance and things as well. But it came about me playing around, intentionally. The legs were supposed to point outwards instead of inwards. To keep the teapot up off the ground was a big part, and I wanted that because I wanted those three forms. It seems like they were a structure that were holding them up. But it was how it was put together, like to get those posts that actually hold the legs. That was a huge thing for me to try and figure out exactly which route to go about it. But through time and through playing and thinking, the idea comes about enough that you can figure it out. So it's fun. Like, this one can actually come apart if you really wanted to take it apart and clean it, except for the lid handle is the only thing that doesn't physically come off. So it was really supposed to be Oddity first and then Intensity, but it was the other way around when I made them. But it was good because the bodies do sit the same way, and roughly the same, roughly the same height off the floor, the body of the teapot off the table. So it was playing around with the design, and that's what I like to do, is take a design and see what I can do with it to come up with something else. So the bodies are identical, but it's just the rest that's different. And this one is personality. It's funny because, like, a lot of times I do not have a name for a piece. The name might come about as I'm working, or it might come out at the end of the piece being made, and that's how this one came about. When I'm trying to come up with ideas, I look at a number of books or magazines, or I try to think of things that happened in my past and see how I can make something. This one here, I was referring to a silversmithing book that I was given one time by George Jensen, one of the most famous silversmiths that ever been on the go. And he wasn't an apprentice, but another artist that worked with him ended up having made a coffee pot and a shaker. And he used these dots on the side, little domes, and he had a very high polish in that. And it was just that pattern that was there and those little domes, that's what made that interesting. So because when I bent it, all it is basically that piece is what you see in that shape. And it was just cut out, so it was sort of that doubled and then bent over a form, and then you're left with that shape. And you have to clean it up, of course, but then the bottom was put on, but then it was kind of boring. And with this one, I didn't want to have a lid handle on it because I wanted to be symmetrical. And so I left both ends open on it. But the dimples on it, I really enjoyed doing, because I haven't done that since school days. Like, that was part of a practice we had to learn. So when I had it at the stage here where I actually had to tape things in place while I was working on it, a friend of mine came in and he said, "Oh, you're making a purse." And it was the same day that I sent Pat Feheley the picture of where I was at that stage. And she goes, oh, it looks like a purse. So then because two people had said the word purse, and I play on the word tea, so personality, and that's how that got its name. But again, with the symmetry, sterling, I try and keep things very simple with, sometimes with the wood and the teapot, not to take away from each other. So I try and keep, this one was based again on an ulu, and I used wavy birch for the handle again, and artificial sinew, just to give it a little bit more balance and having that more Inuit feel of an ulu in it. This piece is called Non-Functionality. It's purple heart, the wood, and sterling silver again. It came about just being non-functionality because it's a non-functional teapot. It does, but it wouldn't pour very well because the distance from the lid is below the spout, and that's what makes it really non-functional. So that's how it got its name. But I really like that curve. Sometimes when I'm doing my drawings for a teapot, I don't do them on small pieces of paper. I'll do a quick sketch that way just so I don't forget. But I'll end up doing it on a large piece of paper so I can get that nice swooping curve. And that's how that one came about. And to balance it on the four legs gives it that little creature kind of feel to it as well. But I like keeping things sometimes up off the table and giving it legs, because when you give it the legs, it almost like gives it a little bit of life. And sometimes it's what I'm looking for, to actually have some movement. So it doesn't leave it kind of static as this one here, but it does have nice movement. This piece is titled Soothed by the Shaman's Brush. Here you can see the shaman and the brush that he has. And in Inuit stories that I've read, sometimes shamans are sent to Sedna, who's the sea goddess legend, and shamans are sent to comb her hair. If the animals are entangled in her hair, that usually means she's mad and she's holding creatures back. If her hair is usually loose, that usually means the animals are on their own to swim and do whatever. So a community, like the story kind of comes about as a community was going through a hard time. So they asked the shaman if he can come and try and help with the starving food, no food and things. So he ended up in a trance going down to the bottom of the ocean to comb her hair for her. So here you have him, he's partially human, but he also has like a seal flippers or walrus flippers for legs. And on the other side, and again the inlay is something I like to do. And on the other side over here, we have Sedna, and she's just had her hair combed. And so the animals, I just did it with one animal, which was a seal, and I inlaid little whiskers out of brass, but he has, showing him as being released. So it because it's a three-dimensional object right from the start, I like to try and include both sides of the stone sometimes in the story. Most times I do, unless I'm doing something like an owl or something, but even then there could be 3, 5, or 7 owls in one stone. But this one here, I definitely wanted to have him and her in the stone so that the piece can intermingle with each other, so that you can actually walk around the piece and it's like a different image on both sides, but the whole thing relates with each other. And that's what this piece is about, is how he had just finished combing her hair. And because I occasionally, and I'll say that very strongly, occasionally make earrings, I decided to throw a little ulu earring in there because there's only one ear that shows. So I figured I'd have to have something like an earring showing in there, just to set it off a little bit. I started making the ulu bowl, that's the title I kind of gave it, when I was a student in NASCAD back in the early 90s. And it was actually the ulu bowl that helped gain my recognition today through the Inuit Art Quarterly from back in the day. I like ulu bowls. For me, family is important. I grew up with a very close family. We were very close. We spent our summers together most times, and all my cousins, we all knew each other very well. I didn't even know most of the kids my age on my street because we hung around with my cousins every summer. So what I titled this one is, it's a representational QUILLIQ ATOP 3 ULUS. And the bowl, or the QUILLIQ, represents the QUILLIQ, which is a soapstone lamp that you see women will light during ceremonies sometimes nowadays when they're having numerous ceremonies. But it was always used as either lighting up the igloo, plus heating the igloo, plus cooking food and drying clothes. It was a very important tool. Women always had one to carry with them, and they used to use seal fat for the most part, and they would use like cotton grass as what was like the wick of it. But this one here is, my ulu bowls are about families don't become a family until a third person is introduced. So you have the husband, wife, and then a child. So that's why I have this. They're all in a round like that to make a triangular shape, but they're holding hands, keeping warm around the QUILLIQ. This one here is sterling silver, tulip wood, and brass. Just to give it a little bit of interest by throwing in the brass to give highlight the different materials. This one here, this little owl that you see right now, but this is just one side. This is called FEATLESS, F-E-A-T-L-E-S-S. It's about a man who's stuck in transition. He was never one to accomplish anything in his life. He always used to leave things unfinished. He could never get any ahead in life, so everybody was getting tired of that scenario with him. Like, they'd ask him for help and he would never finish. So they put him in this transformation stage, and he's stuck between man and owl. So he's at that position until he learns how to become something of himself. And on this side of the piece, you'll see the man, and he's sort of in that transformation form, and then the owl is upside down because he's like, oh, come on, not again. We're sort of here again, almost idea. And here we have Take 37, which is kind of an odd title, but in high school, before high school, grade 3 was the last time I ever had anything remotely to do with art. And then it wasn't until high school that the only thing I can get involved with that was art related was drama. So we did well with the high school drama festivals that we were at. We worked hard, but because of the director we had, Edmund McLean, but we used to spend our weekends rehearsing. And we would have to do take after take because someone might have said a line wrong or something wasn't set up on the stage properly. And that was my job as a stage prop kind of thing, setting up stage props. So we used to spend a lot of our weekends just perfecting everything, but there was always have to redo. So you could be there Saturday morning at 9 and not leave until 9 that evening. And because we were trying to make it as a performance as possible. But there was times when it was like, oh, come on, like, give me a break, not another take sort of thing. So that's the expression he's trying to get here. But I was just playing around with a shaman transformation form again. He's dressed up for a play that he's into, so he's getting ready to do the drum beat, but he's been told he's got to kind of take 37 next sort of thing. You see those little clipboards. That was this thing of possibly ending. And on this side, again, you see another form, which is an owl, who's another character that's dressed up and ready to do the play. And his tongue just sticks out saying, oh, come on, not again, sort of thing. So that's what that piece is about. So you have the anhydrite again, the stone, moose antler for the tongue, and the frame for the drum and the drum stick. The material around the drum is actually tanned hide I picked up from Labrador back home when I was there. And I don't know if the smell is still there, but that tan smell, that smoky smell, has always been in it when I first used it. So it's might still be the smell, I'm not quite sure. And again, with the eyes, it's bone and mahogany and ebony. So I try to use exotic woods. If I'm doing a female figure, I'll usually use green because my wife's eyes are green, so I'll use a green wood. So it's usually a little bit of her I try to poke into each piece.